that Kirk Parsley was coming in, their eyes lit up. They all knew who you were, very excited. So Kirk is a really well-respected expert on all things performance, primarily sleep, but he takes care of clients really on sort of holistic life performance. Yeah. And Mr. Welbourn.
Yeah. Hey, John Welbourn. I'm CEO of Power Athlete, former 10-year NFL player. After retiring, I worked for CrossFit for a number of years, teaching specialty matter expert for performance and really teaching CrossFit community how to use the rubric for performance, and how to apply it over towards field sports, just how to make bigger, stronger athletes. So I did that for a number of years. Obviously started my company, Power Athlete, 2012. We traveled the world. Basically, I've taught people from the Arctic Circle down to New Zealand how to lift weights, how to perform, and more importantly, how to use what you do in the weight room and translate it onto the field. And we work with Naval Special Warfare, had a contract with development group for a number of years, and help people develop online fitness technologies, and also work with special projects, kind of like the Drake's Passage deal.
Yeah, awesome.
And your business has a coaching certification.
Yes.
You never talk about that, but I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. One of the things that I saw was a huge gap in the market. When you look at like the NSCA and some of these groups, they're very agnostic of training. Like, here's the information. This is what we understand about athletes. And then they test people for certifications. What I wanted to do was prepare coaches as almost like, here's a ready-made set of tools so that you could walk into any weight room and train athletes at the highest level. So ours is a lot more steeped in my methodology of Power Athlete and how to train athletes. And the people that use it have gone on and done very, very well. I mean, we're responsible for hundreds of scholarships, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, and really some high performers. So that's been a very rewarding deal. The online methodology, people go through an online course. When they finish, they actually come to Power Athlete and test in person. And we have pretty decent pass rate.
And quite frequently fail.
Well,
I've seen some people get snuck out.
Yeah, it's a sad deal. I always want everybody to pass, but unfortunately, not everybody takes it with the same serious nature they need to. And, we have three pieces. You got to be able to write the information. You have to be able to get up and speak about it. Socratic method. And you also have to be able to teach it. And it's, just showing up with a high five and a cool t-shirt doesn't get you passing into our, what we call our block collective. And it's been a really good, we have about 150 coaches around the world, and every single one of them I could tap in and bring into anything. And they would all come in and kick ass. They actively use it, they coach it, and they live it. And it's been great to really create a community of like-minded individuals.
One of your blocks up there.
I'll bring one for it. And
those steel blocks.
So the act.
Together. It's cool.
So
nice.
For the people that pass, I take 3x3, obviously little squares, and basically make these blocks, and I stamp them with a 50-ton press with a skull and our logos, and then I weld them up, and it's like roughly 36 inches. I mean, 3, so what would it be? 18 times 3. What would that be? 86, 54 so inches of weld per one. And I do anywhere from 8 of them at a time to 20. And so I'll go in and weld for a whole day. And then
it's awesome.
When people pass, I, obviously gift them with this, something I've created, something I've invested, just like they've invested. And if people don't pass, I don't give it to them, just because I've invested into the award or the piece, or really just the symbol that you've passed through this. I always hated going for certifications where they like give you just some piece of paper with some guy's random name on it.
Yeah.
And you put it in a folder and throw it away.
Yeah, it goes away.
This becomes a paperweight. Guys travel with them. They take them in different pictures, and it's been really exciting.
Giving someone a gift always feels good, but giving someone a gift that you made is a whole other level of just good feeling. Yeah.
They're really cool. I have 7 of them.
I think I gave you a super block, didn't I? Didn't I give you a super block? Oh, I thought you had one. I have one for you. No, I'm pretty sure when you came and gave that talk, I was supposed to give, I have a super block for you. Didn't I give it to you? Oh, shit.
I don't remember names, but I remember that.
One thing that I really appreciated my experience at Power Athlete recently was, I've seen a lot of trainers, worked with a lot of really awesome, very gifted trainers. Most of them will teach you how to do something and maybe explain some of the why. You guys are really good at folding in the why as you explain the what. And it really just makes so much more sense. And in the 3 weeks since I've been out there at that session, my workouts have been way better just because of the couple days I spent with you guys.
Well, my idea is I'm not trying to like feed people. I want to teach people to fish. So when you come and train with us and you go through anything, especially with that, the faster I can get you up to a basic level of knowledge and more importantly, a level of proficiency by educating you as we train and giving you all of this information, like everything I've created, I'm not trying to hold tight, like, this is my pretty little thing. And I'm the only person that can give you this. I try to just give it to people because I want people to use it. And the faster I can educate you and get you up to a certain level of knowledge, then the faster we can move. And I'm not trying to like, I don't know. Like I always get nervous.
I think it's also like the foundation. Like, I've been lifting weights my whole damn life, and I've had a lot of coaching and all this other stuff. And I remember going into y'all's gym and you're talking about the different hinges, and I'm like, why didn't nobody ever teach me that before? It's like, it's such an easy concept. It's an important concept, and it's pretty easy. And then you can think, okay, what am I actually trying to do here? What hinge am I trying to do? And then that helps you with your form without anybody coaching you, because you can feel like I'm doing that hinge or I'm not doing that hinge. And if I don't know how to do that hinge, then I need to get somebody to say, hey, why isn't this working? Like, why am I not moving the way I should?
Well, and when we brought the guys in, let's just use the barbell back squat. Every one of the guys like, oh, I can't squat. I can't have this. And they gave me all of these like prerequisites on why they couldn't. And I always said, let's just warm up and see how it goes. I've literally taught tens of thousands of people to squat, and I can probably get you to squat well within probably anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes. Just give me the opportunity. Every one of those dudes like had this light bulb moment where their eyes exploded and they were like, I don't know, I've never moved this well. Why didn't anybody make it this simple? And I'm like, because very few people have had as many opportunities as I have to have coached this stuff. So I retired from the NFL in 2009. We started CrossFit football. That year I taught 36 seminars, and every weekend we went in with 50 new people. I proceeded to teach hundreds around the globe. Every time we get anywhere from 20 to 50 new people. So I had the opportunity to work this stuff out in real time, meet different people, languages. And when you get that much opportunity to work with people, it just becomes very simple. Yeah. And it's like, don't stress. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Everybody has the same set of faults. I'm going to fix this. And we just keep tweaking it until all of a sudden everybody does it. And then all of a sudden they get these light bulb moments, and they end up moving pretty well, and they all feel empowered. And my goal is to educate you enough, give you enough information, have you moving so that you're empowered and that you don't need me. It's a terrible business model.
Mine's the same way. Like, I only coach people for a year. My clients, get me for a year because, like, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know in a year. And I tell all my clients, I'm like, hey, at the end of this year, the person who's going to know the most in the world about your health is me, but the person who's going to know the next most is you. And any doctor you have after that, or any coach or whatever you have, you're going to know more about you and your health and your situation than they are. And then it's up to you to keep doing that, because I'm not motivated by, holding people's hands and, coaching them to do the same thing or encouraging them to do the same thing over and over again. It's like, I want to teach you how to do it. And then it's a decision whether or not you're going to do it.
Yeah. It's up to them.
Yeah. No, I did. I think it's a great, I have always wanted for people to be empowered to have the tools to make their own life changes. Yeah. And we got kind of pulled in to start doing a bunch of online fitness technologies and help train Heroic develop their app with training programs. And so we decided to kind of venture into this like online training market. And really what I wanted to do was provide people obviously the information to be able to do it themselves. And then the problem was people are like, okay, we understand what you're saying, but we like the way you do it better. And so I was like, all right, I'm more than happy to provide direction, but I'm constantly trying to educate people. And especially when they get into this stuff, I'm like, okay, this is how this whole thing flows. And like if they want to do it, if they want. So, I mean, we have thousands of people in these online training programs, and it's like an incredible community of individuals. But what I'm constantly amazed by is how intelligent the people are. So like one of the guys in my training program is a PhD and university professor and teaches strength and, conditioning, performance. And he follows all of our stuff. And I was like, dude, you do this stuff at such a high level. He's like, I've never seen anybody put this stuff together in such a creative way. And I've never seen this level of adaptation. He's like, to the point where I go back and I teach my students based upon this information. He's one of our block coaches as well. And I mean, the guy's like, so it's pretty neat that when high level people come back to you and they're like, you do it better than I do. And I've learned so much. And I'm like, well, dude, I'm kind of humbled in that way. So, there's always this constant, I'm sure you guys run into this where you're like, is what I'm doing making a fucking difference in the world? Am I helping people move farther down the path of success and health and wellness and just being better versions of themselves? Or am I just over here just fucking status quoing? And that's this imposter syndrome.
Sure.
And I think anybody who's worth their salt goes through this deal. I think if you're
Everybody
such a
has
disingenuous piece of shit, you're just like, oh, fuck it.
Or you're just an idiot, or you have a massive ego that you can't control.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm around people periodically that like their ego is like, doesn't really flow with everything else, where you're meeting it and you're like, I don't know where this ego's coming from.
It comes from fear. They're compensating. They're afraid of something. So they put on this armor so that they feel like they're safe from exposing whatever that thing is about themselves that they're ashamed of. Yeah. And this is really the nature of my coaching, right? I'm helping people understand who they are and teaching them how to cultivate their courage to embrace that and love that and then share it with the world. That's where the best shit comes from. That's why you guys are both good at what you do, because you've gotten to that point where intellectually you know that you know your shit, right? But beyond that, spiritually and emotionally, you've come to embrace who you are and you aren't afraid of that. And so you share it with the world and you can walk through the world feeling unassailable.
I've learned enough to know that I don't know anything, but I've also learned enough to know that nobody else knows anything.
Yeah,
You know?
that's right.
I've constantly thought that the whole world is just a whole bunch of people trying to like look like they're busy enough so that nobody figures out that they don't know what the hell they're doing.
You know,
I think that's like the recipe for the government.
The more I learn, the less I know that I know.
Yeah, for like the last 4 years, 4, 5, 6 years, I never really followed politics. I mean, you know, but I think everybody's follows politics now because it just all popped up. But I thought
Soap opera.
Senators and congressmen, like these were like the smartest people in the country that really had their stuff together. Now, man, has that blanket been pulled up?
No, it's really sad.
Grown-ups, real grown-ups ran the country. Like we were all just clowning around. I'm like,
I tried to engage a.
Were that way when I was going to become a doctor. Oh, these are like these are told. There's just many idiot older doctors and immature and egocentric and like I mean.
I call it the cowardice contagion. It's just cowardice.
Yeah.
I tried to engage this Texas state congressman yesterday on this issue because they're in session right now, and I sent him a tweet about something that he was just wrong on, and I was very respectful and positive, and I said, hey, here's some data to consider. And he responded with like this shitty tweet, didn't even acknowledge the data that I shared, and said it's not political. And I said, well, you're playing political games. Like, can we just have a conversation right now about the numbers? Like, this is for the state of Texas and the taxpayers. He wasn't willing to even have the conversation. And that's the majority of the people that we've voted into office. And it's not their fault. It's our fault for being dumb enough to vote these idiots into office. Yeah. But we digress. Want to get on to protein. Oh, a little bit of background on me for those of you who don't know me. So Jud Kauffman, former Navy SEAL, enlisted guy, sniper, serial entrepreneur. I co-founded this company, Desert Door Distillery, which we're drinking today
on Cinco de Mayo.
On Cinco de Mayo. Desert Door is the only distillery that makes distilled spirits from wild harvested, fully sustainable ingredients. So we harvest sotol, which is native to Texas and Mexico. It's super clean, and that's why we're drinking it today. Nowadays, I'm a coach, so I focus on more holistic performance, and really it's identity work that I help people work through so they can figure out who they are and then how that fits into the world. So that's what I'm up to. And all right, let's dive into the content. So protein, I want to start with Kirk. Assume you're talking to someone who doesn't lift, who doesn't take protein supplements. Why do we need protein? And what is it?
Well, what it is, we're going deep with that. That's
maybe at a high level,
yeah,
right?
So, I mean, protein, protein is basically the structure of almost everything in any kind of animal, any type of life form, even plants have protein. Most people know there's 3 macros that we focus on when we're talking about our nutritional status, our nutritional needs: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. They all do, they all essentially work towards the same goals, but they have more kind of specific uses. And so we need to ingest protein as a fuel source. Protein can actually become glucose, so you can raise your blood glucose levels with that. But protein gets broken down into amino acids, and amino acids are used throughout various structures in our body for actually building a structure. They're also consumed in biological reactions, so they're like a substrate for various reactions. If you think about your immune system, people know, like, the IgGs and do we have antibodies, right? People know about all this from COVID. Antibodies, those are blood proteins. You have a protein in your red blood cells that carry oxygen around. You have proteins in your muscles, obviously, in your bones and your tendons and your ligaments, all your organs. So, it's a basic building block of life. Basically, if you consume an animal, everything that you're consuming is either protein, fat, or carbohydrate.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just a chemical building block. We call them by amino acids. That's all it is. So it's pretty basic. I wish it was something a lot more advanced than that, but it's really just chemical structure. We call building blocks that are amino acids, and there's seven essentials and some non-essential amino acids, and those are all consumed and come up, and that actually creates nutrients for our body that allow us to not only continue to grow and put on muscle, but also live a healthy life.
So when we think about protein, a lot of people now are consuming more plant protein for various reasons. There's a debate, plant versus animal protein. It seems to me that it comes down to the amino acids. Can you guys speak to the differences in these two proteins?
Yeah, so animal-based proteins are going to have a complete amino acid profile, and I actually pulled it up, which is phenolphthalein, valenium, threonine, what is it? I'm so bad at these words. Methylene, leucine, isoleucine, lysine, and then histine. And those are our amino acids that we call our essential EEAs.
Those are the 7 essentials.
Yep.
Essential meaning it has to come from your diet.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, there's 9 actually.
Every
There's
other
9.
amino acid you can make. Your biochemical reactions in your body can use various structures to make any other amino acid. So those you have to consume. That's why they're called essential.
And those you can't get in plant protein, or most plant proteins don't have those?
They're not in the same concentrations. I mean, not even close. I think, I'll be blunt. I think the plant protein is junk. I think it's purely an ideology. It has nothing to do with biology. It's nothing to do with science. There's no research anywhere that showed it to be superior to animals.
Yeah.
And the only way to get it is to process it, right? It's like, so if you look at all the research on it, nutritional research is inherently flawed anyways, because they use something called the NHANES, and it's basically this self-reporting. And so, they'll say something like, well, we studied people with high protein diets, and they had this, that, or whatever. Well, how do you know they had a high protein diet? Well, because they reported that on their
Right. They just told you.
And so, and they're just considering protein, right? And they're like, okay, but are they getting all their protein from cheeseburgers at McDonald's, right? Like, yeah. So what do you really stand with that? So they're inherently junk for that reason. But if you look at the research on, and I haven't looked at any of it recently. I think so.
I forwarded you guys over a few. I didn't know if you had a chance to go through them.
Yet, but there was a big watershed publication in Cell Metabolism, I think 2014. The one about cancer, and we can talk about that later. But if you look at all the studies, they're all comparing, even with the animal proteins, they're usually using like a whey protein. Mm-hmm. So they can weigh and measure it, and they can say, like, this, like, we're giving them this many grams. We know exactly that many grams, because the same size steak doesn't always have the same amount of protein in it, right? Because of the fat ratio and all that. So, and so they can do that, but they're comparing one processed food to another, because the original research was all soy. That was kind of the only plant they used, but now there's like pea and rice and hemp and all these other things. But it's a highly processed thing, and I think we've learned our lesson. I feel like we should have learned our lesson about processed foods.
Yeah, well,
I think it's anytime there's a lobbying group pushing for something.
Sure.
I'm highly suspicious.
So I've actually got into this debate, and I actually have written a bunch about it, and I actually just pulled some of the stuff that I have on Power Athlete, and also talked to me, Johnny. But in summary, the systematic review and meta-analysis have found that animal-based proteins tend to have a more favorable effect on lean body mass compared to plant-based proteins, and the benefit appears more pronounced in younger athletes.
Hmm.
On the other hand, protein source is not likely to have an impact on muscle strength, which I thought was interesting. But I think where that really falls on its face is that I don't believe that most people understand how to train for strength or hypertrophy or a combination of both.
And how long it takes to get the strength benefit.
Yeah, no, I mean, for years, if you go back and read any of the, Science of Practice, Adaskorsky, or, any of that, they always talked about a bunch of different mechanisms for muscle growth.
Is that one?
And okay, we're having a little technical difficulty. But
Is mine not working?
Okay.
It's not this. No, that's this.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't have headphones.
Oh.
on.
So what really became like a limiting factor, I think people just figure like, oh, I'm going to take a protein shake and I'm going to put on muscle. Muscle is a byproduct of adaptation. So you're basically forcing your body into an adaptation, which is increasing lean tissue or lean muscle. But the mechanisms for it are super confusing.
Yeah, I mean,
when you get down to it and you look at all the most research, and even this stuff came out within the last couple of years, mechanical tension. So creating as much tension as you can in the muscle and then working the muscle to failure.
the bodybuilders might have been right after all that time under tension.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
but also you think about like, let's say you squeeze a bar and you're creating as much tension as you can in the muscle, and then you're going to do reps up into the point where you cannot do one more.
right.
If you're leaving reps in the tank in this, I mean, in terms of strength is fine. Like if you're able to use compensatory acceleration and other factors in terms of how to build strength, you can build strength very well. But now when you start trying to create this hybrid of strength and hypertrophy, or are you just trying to build for hypertrophy? There's a lot of bodybuilders that carry a ton of muscle that aren't real strong, and there's other bodybuilders that carry a ton of muscle that are stronger than shit.
Yeah.
You also have power lifters that carry a lot of body fat, carry muscle, but also move a ton of weight. So I mean, it's really not mutually exclusive. But I always think that if you're training properly, you should look like you lift weights.
Yeah. Well, so to answer your question further too is, anytime we're dealing with a processed food too, we're removing the matrix that the food comes in, right? And so, the most important thing people need to realize is that we don't understand 99.9% of what people think we do understand. So, if COVID didn't teach you that, I don't know what would, right? The immune system, wildly complex. It's a complex system on top of complex system on top of complex system. Same thing with climate change. Same thing with virology. So why did they get the virology so wrong? It's super complex. But we evolved to be on this planet. We are part of this planet, and we evolved to eat the things that are on this planet. And there's plenty of things going on that we don't understand, right? It's just an example of something like testosterone. You go to a doctor and he says, "Here's your testosterone." Well, testosterone comes from cholesterol, and there's 17 steps in between that and testosterone, and a lot of those steps are metabolically active. So what are you doing about all of those, right?
Yeah.
You're getting rid of all those. And so I think the more you can reapproximate your ancestral beginning, so the matrix matters, I'm sure, but then there's also all sorts of micronutrients in animal products that are not in pea protein and rice protein and hemp protein. You're not getting calcium from that. You're not getting, you're not getting creatine from that. You're not going to get any creatine from if you don't eat meat, unless you're taking a powder or some sort of supplement. So there's people whose ideologies say that plant-based protein is better, but that's not a biological argument. That's a climate morality. There's some sort of ideology behind that. As far as the biological science of it, animal proteins are superior, and I'll debate anybody on that.
Superior is really interesting, because what you can do is you can kind of move the goalposts on this all the time.
Yeah.
In terms of seeing big, strong athletes, obviously, I believe animal-based protein is by far the best solution. Can somebody carry a high amount of muscle eating nothing but plant-based proteins and taking anabolic steroids? 100%. The problem is that the amount in which they have to take it, like let's say, for example, you need to consume 200 grams of protein animal-based. We always estimate at least that's about 2/3 of what they should. So then maybe it's 350 or 400 grams, almost double what they would have to consume with plant-based proteins. And there's records of, some high level vegan bodybuilders carrying a ton of muscle, consuming 400 or 500 grams of protein. I mean, I did a little analysis, and to get 3 grams of leucine, which, ends up being a major factor for the anabolic effect. And
that's
muscle.
that's the primary driver for the muscle growth. Yeah.
It's about 5 ounces of chicken, 1 cup of Greek yogurt, and 4 eggs. Gives you about 3 grams of leucine. For a plant-based approach, you need 13 slices of whole grain wheat bread, 1 pound of spinach, 1 1/4 pound of lentils, and 1.5 pounds of peas.
That's what I usually eat for breakfast.
So the metabolic, I'm sorry.
And you need diapers.
I was going to say the gastrointestinal, the stomach distress that I would have from consuming that volume of lentils and beans and spinach and wheat bread is just, there's no way.
Yeah, I've read that it is much more difficult for most people, the vast majority of people, to process the plant protein versus the animal protein, which is an interesting thing.
So think about the greatest form of white privilege, or just, not even like white privilege, but just like first world privilege, to be like, I'm going to eat the most difficult, processed, least nutrient dense diet imaginable, and I'm going to do it to a point where I can put on muscle. Whereas you think about, ancestrally, I mean, you can go back and look at all the Weston Price, and that's really who we have a good snapshot of some of the early hunter-gatherer tribes. I mean, every one of them ate, animal-based diet, supplemented with fat. I mean, you go through and they're like, the Catawba Indians ate a high amount of sweet potatoes and other things, roots and bulbs, and had 60% carbohydrates. Yeah, but they still ate meat.
Yeah.
Still ate fat.
They took down those buffalo. Ate the whole fucking thing.
I mean, the Inuit Indians, consume a diet exclusively of, whale, seal, and animal.
The other thing too to remember is, like, when hunter gatherers are consuming meat, it's because they got it.
Yeah.
Right. If they had it every day, that's what they would eat. They're not choosing to eat the other stuff. It's like, that's keeping them alive. The roots and tubers are keeping them alive. If they could get a buffalo every day, and consume it, they would. And the other thing, the biggest argument around fruits and vegetables, and I'm not anti-fruits and vegetables, I'm just saying, but the biggest argument around that is the vitamins and micronutrients, right? That's all in the organ meat. And if you look at the apex predator, any apex predator does not eat the muscle, right? Yeah. A lion, a tiger, whatever, they catch an animal, they eat the guts and they leave, and the hyenas and the vultures and stuff eat the musels. So we don't eat that. We don't do a lot of that in first world anymore. Yeah. We did a lot in World War II, because there's a shortage of beef. But if you eat organ meat, and again, this is I'm not coaching anybody on what to do. I'm just saying as a principle, if you ate organ meat, you would never need to eat a fruit or a vegetable again for the rest of your life. Like,
I'd like eating fruits and vegetables.
And I'm not saying this is what you should do. I'm just saying from a biological necessity, you could live the rest of your life without ever eating a vegetable or a fruit, or a nut or a seed. If you had enough animal products, you can get everything you need out of those animals.
I think I eat like 3 ounces of liver every 2 weeks. So what I do is I freeze liver, I cut it up into little cubes, and I eat it frozen.
So when you look at like the
frozen.
So years ago, Matt Lalonde told me that cooking of liver, because it's such a high iron content, and I don't know if you guys know who Matt Lalonde is. He was a Harvard PhD who's now he's a recluse, but one of the
he was a recluse then.
Yeah, he's one of the smarter people I know. But he told me, he goes, there's such a high iron content in the liver that actually cooking it with any heat ends up destroying a lot of the nutrients. So his recommendation is just throw it in the freezer, cut it into little cubes, and pull it out, maybe an ounce, 2 ounces, 3 ounces, and then just eat it raw. Just throw it in your mouth, little small bites of frozen deal. And like every 2 weeks, we actually did a test with Tex, who, one of my power athlete coaches. He ended up eating, I think it was like anywhere from 3 to 12 ounces of liver a week. And then
raw?
No, he was cooking it.
Okay.
Just real low heat.
Seared.
I think he was doing sous vide and eating liver. And we ended up getting blood work done, and he had completely hacked his Krebs cycle. Even though he was eating probably 200 or 300 grams of carbohydrates a day, he was in ketosis and actually was close to liver toxicity.
Oh, wow.
Oh, sorry, vitamin A toxicity.
Vitamin A tox.
Yeah. So these people that are like, the liver king that are consuming all this, it's like, dude, he literally did hate liver every single day for 12 weeks and pretty much had, vitamin A toxicity and hacked his Krebs cycle to when, like, even though he's eating carbs, he was in ketosis. And the doctor, when we got all the blood work done, was like, I don't know what you're doing, but stop what you're doing. And I think it's too much of a good thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. I was reading about the Comanche Indians. I'm a bow hunter, and I was curious to know what their ceremony was
that the,
around
a summer. What's the book? What's it?
Empire of the Summer Moon. Yeah, that's a fantastic book. There's tons of good literature on the Comanches and all the other tribes that lived around Texas and across the United States. But they would take down a deer, and everybody would come in around this carcass, and they would take the liver out and they would pass it around. Everyone would take a bite of that thing raw, and that was like the climax of the celebration of taking this animal down. So they knew that's where the nutrients are. That's where they went first, and then the heart.
Well, I mean,
and they didn't cook them.
I mean, they found that with on like when these guys would get on ships, that they were all getting scurvy and they couldn't keep fresh fruits, so they knew that if they brought on animals and ate the liver, they were fine.
Well, the limes, that's why we call them limeys. I eat nose to tail. I don't know if y'all have had that, but that's you can order that online, and it's ground organ meat. So it's liver, heart, tongue, and maybe kidney or something. I don't know, but it's ground and it's in the and it's mixed with ground beef, and then I'll mix that with some other ground meat. I do that like once or twice a week, and I feel pretty comfortable with that. But we're getting off the topic of protein again, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's no, I mean the protein debate's just an interesting one, just because it's so tied in this. This is evolutionary. I always liked. We had, Tara Swart. She's UK Oxford PhD and actually an MD, and she wrote a great book called The Source. And so we've had her on a couple of times, and she made a great point as we were kind of prepping for the podcast. She was putting that in a new book, and she was on our podcast, and she's trying to figure out why she's on the strength and conditioning podcast. And as we're trying to like connect a little bit, she made a comment, and I basically made another one about those, like something about the memories, which if you read Clan of the Cave Bear, you remember they talked about like, the Neanderthals had big foreheads because they survived on memories. Whereas like Daryl Hannah was a different one. I made a comment about those guys have the memories. And she's like, Clan of the Cave Bear is one of my favorite books. I'm like, me too. So we kind of connected on that, but she made an interesting point where she goes, we didn't evolve to eat meat. We evolved because we ate meat.
Right.
And she's like, at some point we had a common ancestor. There was a long time belief that something happened, drove half out to the plains, and the rest stayed in the forest, and that was the kind of the splitting. But then when they found the common ancestor, which was Andy and Artie, and this was unique to me because that was funded in Berkeley, and it came out in the Daily Cow when they had found whatever those bones were. And then years later, like 10, 15 years later, they finally came out with a documentary about it, and I was so excited because I remember when it happened in the Daily Cow. And what was wild is when they found Andy and Artie. They were found with fossilized bat droppings, which means that they were in a rainforest. And so they kind of dispelled the myth with that, the common ancestor goes out to the plains. Why did they stand up? Probably looking for danger. And then they move from, the quadruped to the biped. And, their only theory was like, why did they stand up? And so it was just an interesting point that she said, we didn't evolve to eat meat. We evolved because we ate meat, the DHEA in this, and went through the whole process. And she's like, evolutionary. Like, this is still within our genes and within our codes. We're the only species that believes that we can act in contrary to what allowed us to evolve to who we are today. And she's super sharp. If there's somebody we should get on this podcast.
I understand the ideology around limiting meat consumption. I think the destruction of the planet is pretty clear. I'm a fisherman, and so I study the rivers to understand their history and what the species, how they behave. And in the last 100 years, at least in Texas, we've lost like 80% of the river species in these Texas rivers, primarily because we're taking so much water out of the rivers in the north and the northwest to water the corn, to feed the cows, to feed the people, right? And so, and the rivers is just one example. But so I get the ideology, but I think there was a documentary, whatever it was called, that was very famous and controversial around plant-based diets and plant-based protein.
Oh, was this Game Changers?
Game Changers, right? And it was a great documentary. I know it's riddled with errors and misinformation.
Bullshit, but it was done in such an amazing way that it I mean, if you didn't
It
know,
was very well done.
Yeah.
But again, full of shit. And it's like, okay, you have this purpose you're trying to serve, which is let's eat less meat to save the planet. I get it. But then you totally undermine yourself by making a documentary that's riddled with bullshit.
Yeah.
And so now people are saying, well, fuck it, I'm just going to eat meat again.
But the issue comes down to, and this is from Rob Wolf and Diane Rogers' book, Sacred Cow, the only way to heal the earth is through the spreading of rudiments. I mean, these animals, what they do is they eat grass, they continue to go, they shit and they poop. Ground nesting birds come in, they break up the poop, they shit nitrogen, and that's how you rebuild the soil. It's a very simple process. The problem is if we don't actively have a market where, there's something to a reason to raise these animals, people aren't going to invest in it and they're just going to die off, and we're basically going to kill our planet. So you don't almost need to, enter things into the cycle. Because here's the deal we've found in markets, and it's better than anybody. If there's not a vested interest in a way to make money off it, people are not going to invest in it. And it just so happens the only way we're going to heal the earth is by investing into, like I said, these large grazing animals, these rudiments, that literally this is what they do. And if there's not a market to be able to eat them or do something, what are we going to do? Just like let them go? I mean, the years of 70 million buffalo roaming this country doesn't exist.
No,
and
it's behind us now.
And the U.S. government went in because we had to, get rid of the red man. So what do? We killed off their food source, which if you read that part of the book, which is in Steve Rinella's American Buffalo book, I mean, we systematically killed off that food source, which was the reason that America became such
a rich.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So you had 70 million buffalo that were moving around, and on the outside were wolves who basically picked off all the weak ones and created this just like super version of these. And everywhere those things went, they shit and they pissed, soaked the land, they moved. Thousands of ground nesting birds came in, broke it all up, nitrogen, and that's why the ground is so fertile because of that.
And if you look at, I just learned this on a podcast, maybe in the last month or so. The green of the earth has actually increased by 30% in the past 100 years.
That's awesome.
The entire planet, 30%
Is
more.
more green?
There's more vegetation, grass, and trees.
Well, do you know what they
30%?
Do you know why they quit? What they quit that to?
There's a NASA study.
Is it because higher CO2 levels?
They're saying higher CO2, but
which
it's also the ruminants, man. It has to be because we're farming. We're raising these things, and the planet still has their normal amount, and we're raising them in excess.
What's that idiot politician with the big chin who's like the environmental czar who flies around on his jet, just fucking
John Kerry.
Yeah,
John Kerry.
I fucking hate John Kerry.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that on this podcast.
Sanctimonious, dude, man.
He got up and they were talking about
climate change.
Well, like levels of CO2, and that scientists say it has to be at this and we're at this. And the guy got up and he was like, 400 years ago, this is what it was, and they've gone back and done it. And like at the time when the earth was most fertile, this is what it was. Like, why are we saying this is a bad thing? Well, these scientists all agree, and I'm like, yeah, there were also 50 Central Intelligence officers that signed a letter that said the Hunter Biden laptop deal was Russian disinformation. And then all of a sudden I'm watching that driving this morning I'm watching this on the TV where like came out and that whole thing was fabricated. So like, how are we supposed to believe any of this stuff?
It's easy to get scientific consensus when you censor all of the ones who don't agree.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's what's happened in a lot of this.
I do like the little sake glasses.
Yeah, these are.
So my buddy Matt
These
is
are
actually
called copitas.
So my buddy's Matt is actually taking his wife over to Desert Door today for lunch.
Awesome.
And he had me up. He's like, hey, do you and your wife want to go on a double date? We'll go over to Desert Door and have some drinks and this for Cinco de Mayo. And I was like, I would, other than the fact that I'm going to be sitting here with Jud, who is the co-founder for it. Maybe another time.
It's one of the nicest tasting rooms you'll ever go to. It's a great place to spend the day. So I'm glad they're going. It's in Driftwood. For those of you listening, you better go check it out. All right. Well, we ended up on John Kerry and politics. So let's steer it back. Although that's fun. Maybe we have time to go back to politics at the end. I want to talk about just what is required to build muscle? And I know it's really complex, back to your point on, you can be massive, you can be strong, you can be functional, all these different things. But
Well, what you need is you need a stimulus. So
Yeah.
you have to understand the stimulus to build muscle. Because
let's talk about that.
Well, unfortunately, muscle is extremely expensive, right? It's hard to cultivate. It's hard for your body to maintain. That's like if you were to take somebody and all of a sudden put them in.
Which is how you knew the Liver King was bullshit.
Oh,
Your body's an efficient machine. It's only going to build muscle if it has to.
Yeah.
It's better to be as small as possible and be able to do the work.
Yeah.
Because then that's less energy demands for you. Yeah.
And it's just very expensive. So like if you look at
That's why I'm 185. It's all
any
part
of
of
the
my strategy.
and anything from starvation. Like if you put somebody into a starvation mode, the first thing the body does is it consumes all the muscle, because it's the most expensive, and it'll live the shortest amount of time on muscle. It'll live the longest on fat. So the idea that you're going to starve away your fat sources has never made sense. Any of the starvation stuff, muscle is by far the most expensive thing to maintain. That's why when I was 270,
and also because it's very metabolically active.
Yes.
Right. So apart from your liver, it's exercise to muscle. If you aren't moving, then not so much. But yeah, apart from your liver, it's the most metabolically expensive tissue in
that's
your
why
body.
we call it an organ.
Yeah. And so your fat, not very expensive metabolically, it just kind of sits there. Yeah.
But because it's so metabolically demanding to do it, your body doesn't naturally just grow. That's when people are like, "Oh, I put on muscle so easily." I'm like, "Really? How is that?" Because I've never met anybody like that. So if you need to put on muscle, obviously you need a stimulus, right? Which is going to look like consuming some form of food. So you're going to need some form of caloric surplus. You're going to need a high protein diet because it's very difficult. And people are always like, "Oh, you just need a caloric surplus." I've never seen anybody carry a large amount of muscle that didn't consume a high protein diet. So now if you look at bodybuilders, for example, right, I've looked at, I've trained with bodybuilders. I know a lot of bodybuilders, and I think what they've done is figured out the way to carry the most amount of muscle that humans have ever carried. Now you can say performance enhancing, whatever, all that stuff's available to the whole world. So there's a lot of people that take anabolics that you would never guess that they do, just because they don't look like they do because they know how to train. But the one thing that bodybuilders have figured out is how to carry a lot of amount of muscle. Every one of them eats a high protein diet. I've seen guys do low carb, high fat, high protein, low carb, or high carb, low fat. I mean, every combination you've ever seen. The prerequisite is always high protein. So it's very difficult to carry a lot of muscle without a high protein diet.
Yeah, if you're going to build muscle, that's the only place. That's the only thing you can build it from, right? You can't build a muscle out of carbohydrates. You have to build it out of amino acids.
Yeah, but what those do though is, if you look at the 80s,
you can maintain muscle mass, because if you don't go into a caloric deficit, then your body won't consume your muscles to get amino acids, right? As long as you're eating enough protein. But if you're so you can maintain muscle without eating a high protein diet, but you can't grow muscle. You can't build muscle without a high protein diet.
Yeah, we've seen, there's kind of a internet kind of yeti or folklore, the idea that you can lose fat and gain muscle at the same time. And you'll hear people go, "No, you can't." 100% you can. If you eat a high protein diet and caloric restriction and lift weights, like I teach people in Power Athlete, you can gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. It's just, we've done it over and over again.
Every client I've ever had.
Yeah. But it allows, you have to eat a high protein diet and you have to lift in such a way that stimulates this. And I think what happens is, to go to a place that you've never been, you have to do something you've never done.
Yep.
So it's a lot easier. I was at one point 280 pounds of lean, 282 pounds of lean muscle. So for me to put on muscle and get back to it is not as difficult as it was to get to that point. So it just,
you get older.
100% it does.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, my goal, even though I go train as if I'm trying to put on muscle every day, I know that if I can just maintain my lean body mass forever, I'll be fine. So, I mean, what I did in my 20s, I don't have to try to go out and hammer and pick and chisel out new stuff. I just need to be able to maintain what I have.
What sort of rates? I don't know, it varies from person to person based on your biology and genetics, but what kind of rates of gain can people expect if they go on a program like one that you guys would suggest?
It depends on age. So if I had so the biggest factor is age.
Yeah.
Things like
And sex
volume,
would be next.
intensity. Do you have favorable androgen profile? Some people are just wired up a little bit different. Are you doing a training program that has the right mix of volume and intensity that allows you to progress? We found very early on with beginners or people that were first exposed to a barbell, using a basic linear progression with fixed volume allowed people to put on a ton of muscle very quickly. And we can get really that initial adaptation is really pretty powerful to the point where
What's a ton of muscle? What do you mean?
they can put on, like if I were to say like 2 pounds a month of muscle, I mean, that's not if over the course of a year, a relatively untrained 17-year-old kid.
Yeah. I was going to say it has to be a pretty untrained guy. Yeah.
Like anywhere from like 14 to 16 pounds.
year.
We've seen that done in a year. Now, obviously, as you age, and then all of a sudden, when you tailor off from this beginner into this intermediate, more advanced, it becomes very difficult. And all of a sudden, you're at the point where you're in your 20s, and if you can put on 1 or 2 pounds of muscle a year, now all of a sudden, hey, you're looking pretty good. So what people end up doing is they end up bulking, which means they just are consuming mass amount of calories and realize I can put on lean body mass with fat at the same deal. It's very difficult to just put on lean body mass. So that's why for a lot of the kids, we just try to get them as big and strong as possible. And then if they need to cut later on, it's a lot easier for me to have you spend 20 years trying to get as big and strong as you can and then cut you down more so than do this like very incremental micro bulk. So,
and that's assuming that that their fitness and aesthetic goals are aligned with weightlifting, and they're not like ultra marathon runners or something, which is that's a different ball of wax. It's a different training adaptation, and to them actually the thing for those guys to track is their carbohydrates.
Sure.
Because once they deplete their carbohydrates, they're going to start consuming their muscles. So
well, that's also glycogen in the cell.
Yeah.
If you go look, this has always fascinated me. If you go back and look at any of the 80s bodybuilding magazines, any of the huge bodybuilders, they were consuming like 800, 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day. And these dudes were absolutely swole.
Yeah.
And, you don't see that today in the same way. And I wonder if it comes down to maybe the quality of the food or just the fact that people got so scared of carbohydrates. Like I've met so many people that have such a death afraid of carbs lately. I'm like, dude, you need carbs to grow. It's very difficult. All of the research I've seen with ketogenic diets, it's very easy to lean or maintain lean muscle mass with a ketogenic diet. I think it's very, very difficult to put on muscle with a ketogenic diet. And I tried for a number of years.
Yeah.
We had to use carb cycling to get it to work.
Yeah. And there's certain activity levels that just don't lend themselves to ketogenesis either. Like if you're, if you're a power lifter or an Olympic lifter or you're a shot putter, maybe even a sprinter, like, okay, maybe because it's just a few seconds of activity, and if you're an endurance athlete, like an ultra endurance athlete, you don't need a whole lot of anaerobic pop, those guys do well in ketogenesis. But if you're like an intermediate kind of, if you're whatever soccer player, like a field sport kind of athlete or something like that, or a martial artist or something, and you need that glycogen, you need that blood glucose, you need those carbohydrates to be able to have that power and explosiveness on demand. But also what people don't think about, I don't read a lot about, and when science hits the mainstream media and lay audience, it always gets perverted anyway. But something I don't hear much about is, and you've experienced this, is just like the cognitive, emotional, pain threshold and perceived effort of being on a ketogenic diet. It's just like, you just don't feel as good. It's like my mood is fine and my cognition is fine, but it's like, things just seem a little harder. It's not huge, but if I was competing as an athlete and I wanted to be the absolute best I could be, I wouldn't want to feel like that, because there's just a little lag to it.
So when I first came in the NFL, I ended up getting hurt my rookie year. I came in and ended up rupturing a patellar tendon. And I was on IR the rest of the year. They said, hey, you probably never run again. You'll never play football again. So always like, all right, now what do we do? So I had this goal. I wanted to rehab to be the best that I could. And at the time, I had a supplement deal with a guy named Mauro De Pasquale. And Mauro is really the father of carb cycling. If you look him up, he's anything that you see that looks like low, high, ketogenic, whatever, came from Mauro in his original work. Everybody else, like the Martin Brookstroms and everybody that looks like carb cycling at all, came from Mauro's work. So Mauro did my original diet. and we did a cyclical ketogenic diet that looked like carb cycling. I didn't eat a carb for 21 days. It was, Vince Gironda's Stone Age diet, a high protein, high fat, no carb diet. We did that for 21 days, and then we did the first carb refeed, and we ended up bulking. I ended up getting from, I think I was like 305. I went to 326 in off season, and I was the biggest and strongest I ever was, but I was way too big. And he's like, no problem. We changed the calories, we changed the workout, we changed everything. And I showed up at camp that next year at like 306 at like sub 10% body fat. And pretty
That's
much
awesome.
that year at 23 completely changed me physically to the person that you see today that I've been able to maintain for the last 20 plus years.
Wow.
The dieting tricks, the muscle, the strength, like everything that we did at that 23, 24-year-old kid laid the foundation for the rest of my life. It taught me how to diet. It taught me how to eat. It taught me the value of protein. It taught me the value of how to train and lift weights. And to the point where our young fighters and some of the people that I work with, I do the exact same thing that I did because they're at that right time where all of a sudden it hits it. But I learned very early on that submaximal efforts produce submaximal gains, that we were going to have to constantly push one rep past, one rep past, one rep past. Used a ton of compensatory acceleration, which is as mechanical advantage increases, so does speed. Used a lot of plyos, a lot of dynamic work. There was just a lot of like being able to overreach is how I ended up getting big and strong. I never got there leaving one rep in the tank, leaving 2 reps in the tank. And I think it paid dividends. It allowed me to do something for over a decade, or for a decade, that not a lot of people get to do. And it's been very interesting to see. There's so much. I mean, the internet is, and especially social media, podcasts. I mean, everything. There's so much information out there. But at the end of the day, you got to eat enough calories to sustain what you're looking to do. And if you want to put on muscle, that just doesn't come, and it's not cheap. So you got to be willing to do what somebody else isn't to be able to attain it. And then, obviously supplementation. If you're micronutrient deficient, like we can talk about testosterone, like what do you need? Zinc, magnesium, iron, copper, selenium. I mean, you need all those elements to build testosterone. And I think without the micronutrients, you're really just dragging a sled uphill.
Yeah, you're not going to go far.
Yeah. I'm also the longest continuous creatine user on the planet. 14 years old.
Nice.
1990.
How do you take creatine? When do you do it? And how do you use it?
Old man George Zangus, who was the old power lifter that trained us, he had a health food store, and he came in, he gave us all these bottles of something. They were all in white label, like nothing on them. He's like, take a teaspoon of this morning and night. And we started taking creatine when I was 14. And I've taken a teaspoon in the morning and a teaspoon at night for over 30 plus years. And I really think, and even though people are like, oh, I don't know if creatine really has as big a benefit for muscle, 100%, I think it does. The research is yes and no. And, but the problem is that we were talking about research. Every time I read something,
It's all subjective.
but the one thing that's not subjective is the cognitive effect. What it's doing in terms of starving off Alzheimer's, ATP, just the neuroprotectant. Oh my God, it's huge.
And as far as
Maintaining somewhat sedentary muscle mass, there's no question. The research is very clear on that too. You'll maintain muscle mass way better. And interestingly enough, omega-3s, I'm not really sure why, maybe membrane permeabilities, membrane strength, pliability. I think that applies more to women than men, but it applies to both.
Well, we found, I'm going to pull it up, but there was one of the guys who's in one of my Block 1 coaches has a PhD, and they're doing research in his lab on, where is it? On supplements, and they found what is the biofactor in krill oil. It's like Astra. I can't remember what the supplement, but they found is like 100% beneficial for building muscle. So, essential amino acid, fish oil, krill oil, 100% much better in terms of building muscle. So
I was talking about maintaining sedentary muscle, like in elderly populations and hospitalized patients and stuff like that. We know that creatine maintains muscle mass when you're not exercising. And I said omega-3s too. Yeah.
What about BCAAs for the same purpose?
If you are eating a high protein diet, it's like
already in there.
yeah, it's already in
need-
there.
you don't need a
It's,
supplement.
yeah, it's like
I take them when I fast.
it's like throwing a bucket of water into a lake.
Yeah.
I think the supplement companies did a really good job of selling BCCAs. I think if you're eating a high protein diet, I just don't see the benefit. And if you're going to take them, I think maybe essential amino acids are probably a better thing to do it. I just wouldn't waste my money on it. And we did it for years. There was an idea that especially if you were fasting, about 10 years ago, we got really, really into this fasting thing. And when we looked at all the meta-analysis, it really just looked like a fancy way to do caloric restriction. Only within the last year or so has new research come out that shows some cognitive benefits. But the cognitive benefits, the physiological benefits for fasting really much more had to do with the fact that you weren't eating within an hour of waking and you were eating 2 hours, or your last meal was 2 hours before bedtime.
Yeah.
So the fasting, like when they looked at all the research, they found all these positive effects, but like the length of fast didn't really matter as long as you weren't eating within an hour of waking and your last meal was 2 hours before you go to sleep. So there wasn't a big difference between 6 and 4 and 8, as long as you adhered to that hour before and that 2 hour after.
The prolonged fastings are more important as you get older because they'll clear out senescent cells.
Yeah. I've read that research. So I fast every new moon. This is how I sync it up. I'll do at least a 36-hour fast. And it's hard, but by the end of it, man, I feel fucking awesome. I don't know what it is, but I feel fantastic.
So would you do that once a month?
Yeah, once a month, every new moon.
You have a ton of cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. So stress hormones, which get released when you're starving. That's why you feel great. So it's kind of working your way towards the fight or flight pathway, Yeah.
What about protein quality? So, certainly high quality eggs, for example, the taste is way better than your cheaper eggs. The same is true with meat. But what have you guys seen in your experience in terms of the quality of protein with respect to muscle gain? Does it make a big difference?
So there's a guy named Peter Ballerstedt. And do you remember Peter? He's like the world's leading forage agronomist. So he spoke at the Ancestral Health Symposium the year that I did, and we had him on the podcast. And I was really wrapped around the axle on this idea of, grass-fed meat. And
I remember you telling me about this podcast. Yeah.
So we, and it was just kind of a paleo common talking point at the time where it's like, the value of grass-fed meat versus grain-fed and this. And it just, it was a very convenient narrative and one that was very easy to just expound. And so I had, we were at Ancestral Health Symposium and had Peter Ballerstedt on, and he got up and he gave this incredible talk where it's like, ideally you would like to eat it from grass-fed, pasture-raised, local organic things because it supports the, local ecosystem. But if it comes down to it, like the better question is, are you eating meat? And once you answer yes, now we can start taking these branches down, because if you're eating fats for omega-3s, 1 or 2 walnuts is going to kill that. If you're eating it for this, and they did, his job is pretty interesting. And then he travels the world looking for the most nutrient dense grass on the planet. And they take seeds, they go back and they give it to ranchers who grow it and then feed it to their rudiments. And then what they do is they slaughter the animals and then they look at the meat content. And he's like, there's not really a big difference between what's at the supermarket for the, grain fed. When you look at, like, obviously the pasture raised and the grass fed, it's, more favorable, but it's not that different. And, it's going to be very difficult to feed, this amount of people. So personally though,
Bro, there's toxins and chemicals, right? That's
100%. Right. Now you get into Roundup and there's a million other things, but like, it really is just comes down to, are you eating meat? If the answer is yes, then you can go on. Personally, I think the grass-fed tastes better. I like it.
There's no question
it's
about
leaner.
it.
The fact that I can cook it faster and if I had the same amount of heat for like a big grain-fed steak versus a grass-fed, it's no night and difference. I think the taste better. But I also like the taste of buffalo, which is, they don't do feedlots for buffalo. So I also like the fact to be able to go visit the ranches. There's some amazing places like Augustus Ranch down here in Texas. It's about 90 minutes away. I drive down there and I pick up boxes from them. And I think that their meat is probably the best I've ever had. That's who Always Salt and Time gets their meat from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just some of the best in the world. So yeah, Peter really just I had this preconceived notion, and then he came on and he's like, hey, here's the truth. And
I think it's more the hormones and the antibiotics that matter, and that that there's definitely solid science behind that, because you are affecting your gut biome with those antibiotics, and you are affecting your hormones with the hormone in the meat.
And the pesticides, right? You can't get rid of herbicides and pesticides through any sort of processing.
Dude.
And so when you eat that meat, or if you drink an alcohol, like most whiskeys, most tequilas, that shit's sprayed with pesticides. You can't get rid of that through distillation. So you end up ingesting that on your meat or in your drink, and then that's what fucks you up. But interesting to know that the quality of protein doesn't really have much of an effect.
Yeah.
In terms of how that
purely from
metabolizes.
that. So, I mean, the reason we got into this discussion was, we were trying to, we did a whole series. It was like bulking on a diet. This guy hit me with a question like, hey, I think it was like $20 a day to spend on food. Can I get, big and strong off of $20? So we went back and took $20 and went out and figured out that like the most nutrient dense food you could consume is organ meats. You can go get ground meat in here. And we basically did the experiment.
It's great.
And we're able to consume, I think it was like 225 grams of protein and eat a nutrient dense diet on $20 a day.
Organ meat
was the big,
awesome.
Yeah. It was like tongue. It was, barbacoa, obviously liver, kidneys, which I absolutely despise. I try to cook kidneys.
Yeah.
But I'm a huge fan of pate. Like that's
in moderation. I brought some liver back from a hunt this year to my kids. My wife was like, I don't know. I made some tacos, deer liver. Dude, the kids fucking loved it.
We do hearts. So I get buffalo hearts. And then what I do is I throw them in the crock pot for 24 hours.
Heart's great.
And then I cook it again for 24 hours, continuous for 2 days. It turns basically into this like stringy mush. And then I cut it up and I make heart tacos. And my wife's like, don't tell him. I'm like, I got to tell him.
You got to tell them.
And then they're like, I'm like, it's heart. And they're like, all of a sudden they're like on their fourth one. Like, these are so good. They're like, I'm like, nope, keep eating them. I'm going to eat all this heart.
Yeah, you got to teach them now. That's the good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to open it up to audience questions. We've got some coming in. If you're out there listening, send them in and we'll take a look. Will, do you got any questions right now ready to go?
It was just that one so far that I'm seeing about why isn't calories in versus calories out the biggest factor?
Calories in, calories out. Why isn't that the biggest factor? We kind of touched on this.
For what?
Yeah, for weight gain.
Well, I mean, ideally,
you get all your calories. You can get all your calories from Snickers bars. That's why.
Yeah.
So it's not just fuel partitioning matters a ton. So what your body does with a carbohydrate or protein or fat, that's driven by how well you're resting and all that, but and how hard you're training, what type of training you're doing. But if you're not eating the right combinations of macros, then you can't partition in the right way to build muscles. If you're eating like all carbohydrates or all fat, then you don't have the substrate to build muscle with.
Yeah, I mean, Lane Norton was a big, really the proponent between calories in, calories out. And I think in terms of creating fat loss and making smaller people, it makes sense. We've seen people diet on, beer and potato chips and beef jerky and lose weight. But when you start talking about putting on muscle, like I said, muscle is extremely expensive. And I've yet to seen any professional bodybuilder come out and be like, I ate zero protein. I ate nothing but a high carb, high fat diet. And now I'm standing up on stage at 3-4% body fat, regardless of the drugs. I just haven't seen it. I mean, not to say that there's not somebody out there, but until I meet somebody who I can legitimately say, hey, dude, this guy ate it.
I don't know how you could trigger the process of
You
making
can't.
muscle without leucine. I mean,
You can't.
And you have to have the essential amino acids.
can't.
You have to be eating it. So
It does
you have
work.
to have the right portion.
But
proportion.
you
And
also,
if you're just trying to train muscle, like if you're trying to be an athlete, but not necessarily gain muscle, protein might not be the metric for you, but you should still go for probably, probably 1.4, say 1.5 grams per kilogram.
yeah, we do 1 gram per pound of body weight, but I'm just, man, I have yet to personally, a high protein diet is kind of a non-negotiable for me. Whether you're following, like, I don't care, I've always said, dude, a high protein diet's a non-negotiable. How you want to skin carbohydrates and fats is going to be based upon you as the individual and your taste. I've seen
in your
people-
activities.
and your activities.
Yeah.
If you're a high motor dude, you're going to have to probably eat some more carbs, eat a little less fat. I've also run into people that tend to do better on less fat and more carbs. And I've met other people that do better on less carbs and more fat. And so what we do is we start everybody on what I call isocaloric, which is a high protein diet with balanced carbohydrates and fats. which is cuts into thirds. And then from there, we just kind of see where they go. If you're over 20, 25, 30% body fat, I usually put everybody on a high protein diet, low carb, higher fat diet. And then as their body fat comes down, I found that I can get to a balance, let's say around 18, 17, 18, 20%. I get to an isocaloric. And then as we continue to come down, if I get somebody under 10% body fat, or I get somebody at 12 that wants to get under 10, I have to drop the fat and off the carb. So it almost becomes the more muscle you carry in relation to body fat, because muscle is extremely insulin sensitive, fat's extremely oxidative. So the leaner you get, the more carbohydrate you can handle. So I've never seen I've never dieted anybody personally. I've never dieted under 10% with a low carb diet. I've always had to switch to a higher carb, low fat diet to get under 10%.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think as we age, we lose. There was an interesting bunch of research, and there's a book out of Australia, and I can't remember the researcher, and her contention was as we age, we lose the ability to process carbohydrate. So there should be some periodization with carbohydrates and fats as we age.
I would think that has a lot to do with activity, though.
Activity and muscle.
Yeah. So if you maintain muscle mass and maintain activity, that's your GLUT4 receptors that's the primary uptake of glucose.
Yeah.
So when you don't exercise, you can take somebody 65 years old, and whatever, they get injured or whatever, for some reason they sit around for 2 weeks, they'll become pre-diabetic in like 2 weeks. And totally healthy person that is normally out, working, doing their garden, whatever, and out doing basically 20,000 steps a day or something, and you can put them in a bed for 2 weeks, they'll be pre-diabetic, and it'll take them 6 months to recover from that.
Yeah, no,
It's hard to build that back.
Well, I think it's activity level and it's effort. There's community and some other things we've discussed. Like, for example, today I trained from 6 to 7:30, went down and got a coffee, came back at 8 and had my fighters and trained with them until almost 9:45 and do my best to try to kill them, and then shot over here. And, it's just like, I think it's a function of community training. What are you doing? The one thing that I think we've done very well in Power Athlete is created a group of like-minded individuals that are searching and training for performance and supporting each other in the process. And I think, not everybody's got to train like you're going to try to kick every door off the hinges, but I think everybody should. And I think that, as long as, and I think the one thing that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has done really well is to let us know that over the age of 50, you can attain your best physique. Like, you can bitch about the drugs. I want to know what he's taking, because I'm not kidding you, dude. The Rock, when I was in Philadelphia, Tommy Kanabe was our strength coach. He was his strength coach at Miami. So he would come train with us every time he was in Philly. So we got to know him real, real well. The Rock that we trained with, compared to what I see today over the age of 50, like, two fucking different human beings. Like, he looked like kind of just I don't want to say lunchy, but like, he wasn't, he was in shape.
Even when he was a wrestler.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's when we met him.
Yeah. He wasn't that.
Well, he was in his 20s. So he
Yeah.
was in his late 20s, early 30s. Realistically, I remember we went in to lift weights and he was like, shit, if I could be as big as you are. I was like, well, do you want me to help you through diet? But now I see him.
Figured that out.
Yeah.
I know he had surgery on his pecs. He talked about that publicly,
so
but he hasn't really shared what his secret is on supplementation or
he
whatever
had
he's taking.
some gynecomastia that they ended up cleaning up because you could see it a little bit. So obviously, which is equated with anabolic steroids.
Yeah.
So he probably did at some point, but you see him now, and like I watched.
He looks incredible. He's like 54 or something.
Yeah, we watched Black Adam on an airplane out to California.
Amazing in that movie.
And my son was like, he looks like a legit superhero. And I'm like, dude, that's not CGI. That's how he looks.
Well, but he went to his trainer and he said, I want to have a physique that looks like the classic Marvel comic superhero. How do we build that? And like, that was their 1 year program. It's just creating that.
Well, he's Samoan and black.
Yeah.
You're talking about
He's got great genetics.
Like the greatest meeting of genetics. The only thing is if they can maybe throw some Filipino in there. So I've always joked that Rafael Ruiz, who trained me in the NFL, is Filipino. Like, those are the master race. Like, Raf was stronger, faster, and like could move better. And then I'd like meet all like his buddies were the same. And I'm like, damn it. So you got the Rock, who's got genetics of like Samoan and black. He has the genetics for it. He has the financial ability to like Iron Paradise and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Whether or not, he's obviously taken something I would be ignorant to say he hasn't, but also there's no way to
Well,
equate.
there's no doubt he's disciplined. He's
But-
working hard. He's
but
doing
the-
things right.
yeah.
But
I mean, somebody's planning his meals.
I think
His
that
training.
I think research bores out. You don't. It's very well.
It's
There's
very
no
hard
re-
at 54.
There's no research to show that anybody can put on muscle after, say, like 40, early 40s. You know, it's like without some
yeah.
sort of
Intervention.
pharmacological intervention.
Yeah, they say after
Yeah.
the age of 40 you lose, what was it, like 1% a year of muscle. But
that's on average for
people that don't train.
people that don't move around. So you can slow that down a lot.
Well, I mean, I go into the gym every single day, and every time we walk in the gym, I have a goal to set a PR either on a rep, like, hey, for this machine last time we did 6 reps at this weight, today I'm trying to do 7. And if I hit 10 reps, then we add weight to the bar, or we add weight to whatever we're doing, and I start the fight over again. So I'm pretty disciplined with a journal where I go in, I know exactly what we're doing, and I know what I want to hit on that day. And if I hit that, then my day is a win. If I don't hit it, then I got to go back and find a new way to set a PR. And I find as long as I get a work towards a single extra rep or a heavier weight, then I'm effectively moving towards my goal, which is to maintain and try to put on as much muscle as I can as I age.
That's an awesome philosophy, John. I love that. You reminded me of this chief I had when I was in the SEAL teams. His name was Manny Rangel. Did you ever know Manny? Hard as nails, dude. When I was in his platoon, he was 44. I was 24, and could run circles around me. And one day I asked him, I was like, what's your secret? How are you doing this at your age? Like, you're a beast. And he said, well, I earn my fucking trident, his SEAL insignia. He's like, I earn that thing every day. And I take that to heart. So every single morning, I'm trying to outdo what I did yesterday. And that's all I do. And that was his approach. So very similar to what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I admire that.
It's, and then what's nice is, my training partner is a former Division I collegiate wrestler. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kids I work with are all world champions. There's, Philippe, who trained today, took second in pans. Arash and Victor are down to Brazilian nationals. Victor's going to compete in the ultra or in the open tomorrow in the ultra. I mean, he's one of the top ultras in the world. So, I mean, I'm really lucky in that the people that I'm training with, either within the confines of Power Athlete or on the mat, are some of the legit killers in the world. So, I mean, there's a really high level. And I think if you want to learn to swim fast and swim well, you got to swim in deep waters. And I think all too often we're so scared to put ourselves out of our comfort zone. And I have no problem with being, outside my comfort zone and being able to, ask myself to do things that I didn't think I'd be able to. I just think, like, fuck safe, fuck comfort.
Don't play it safe. It's
and I'm not
lame.
like into this, like, Jocko or David Goggins, where it's like, you got to embrace your inner bitch. I just think you have to push yourself into the deepest waters possible. And I did that through my NFL career. We did a podcast yesterday with Joe Thomas, who just got into the Hall of Fame, offensive lineman, played for the Cleveland Browns. And my heart broke for him a little bit when I realized he never played in a playoff game. And he never played on a winning team. I think maybe one year they had 10 wins his first year. But every year after that, never got to the playoffs in this, and never got a chance to play against, like, the best. I mean, he got to go against James Harrison and all these, rock stars, but he never got to go against them in the playoffs. He never got to go against them when he wasn't a Cleveland Brown. And I don't know if he ever got their best. Now, he was a number 3 pick overall, played 11 years, gets a chance to go to the Hall of Fame, but gets to go to the Hall of Fame having never played in a playoff game. And amazing dude, such a awesome dude to connect with. But, like, my heart broke a little bit when I heard that, because for me personally, I always wanted to stand on the biggest stage and play against the best player on his best day in front of everybody with nowhere to hide. And I got a chance to do that for a number of years, and was fortunate to catch some of the best guys on their worst days, which I always hoped. I just wanted to catch the best guy on his worst day. But Joe was an amazing podcast and just an amazing dude. But my heart broke a little bit for him, where I was like, "Fuck, dude, you never got a chance to play," because the bullets in the playoffs, especially in the NFC championship games and far into the playoffs, those bullets were faster than any other bullet.
Sure, everyone's playing at their peak.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that. Courage is what I think it is, and something I think about a lot. Most people, and I was this way for a long time myself, most people are really afraid, back to your point, John, afraid to really put themselves out there, right? People will kind of, push some limits here or there, but people are really afraid to be seen for what they are. And I think people like you somehow have gotten past that fear that makes you want to just kind of turtle up and always play it safe. And a couple of years ago, I was honored to be asked to do a commencement speech at a high school. And I said yes immediately. And then I had to go think about what the fuck am I going to say to these kids? So I went on a hike, which is where I go to think. And I thought, all right, what's my message to a graduating group of high school kids? Like, I don't know. It was a hard thing, but where I landed and the title of the speech was "Don't Play It Safe." I think that's the worst thing you can do if you want to die a really happy, joyful fucking person, is always play it safe. Take that first job, choose the easy major in college, take the first job you get and just kind of ride it out comfortably in luxury. But would love to hear kind of both of your thoughts on how people can overcome that and how people can cultivate their courage to look inside themselves, see what is there, and then turn around and share that with the world. What do you think the difference is?
Man, stupidity. I'll just give you an example, right? So
Great answer.
I got a ton of scholarship offers. Like, I can't remember, like, it was, I mean, if it was in 100, it was, I got a lot of scholarship offers. And I remember going through all the schools, and I ended up taking trips to SC, UCLA, Colorado, Nebraska, and Cal. And I went to Nebraska, and Nebraska was amazing. I would have a chance to win a national championship and play on a really good team. And that was extremely important to me. But then I remember, as I was trying to make this decision, my dad, who really valued education, graduated high school graduated high school at 16, graduated undergrad at 19, graduated law school from USC and is like 21. I was a practicing attorney. I mean, one of the smarter people I've ever met in my life. And my dad was like, football is just going to be a fleeting thing. It's something you're going to do for a short period of time. What degree do you want to hang on your wall? Where are you going to stress yourself? Is Nebraska a center for excellence? Do the smartest people in the world, teach and have Nobel Prizes at Nebraska? I mean, you're going to go there to play football. What happens if football doesn't work out? And on top of it, are you ever going to be challenged at that school? And I decided to go to Cal and go to Berkeley for one reason, for the fact that I knew every single day I was going to have to get up to be challenged. Now, obviously Pac-10 football, whatever it is now, Pac-11, Pac-12, Pac-8, whatever. Football was good, and there was guys that got a chance to go to the NFL. A lot of NFL players came out of Berkeley. But my dad made a good point where he's like, you need to go someplace where you are in deep water, where you go in and you're a little nervous every single day that you have to do the work. If it's too comfortable, you're never going to grow, and growth comes from discomfort. So I decided to go to Cal. And I laugh now that if I knew I was going to play 10 years in the NFL, I probably would have gone somewhere else. But I also wouldn't replace that experience and going in and like 3, 4 in the morning, working on papers, just having to hustle and work and bust my ass to get that degree. And I graduated in 4 years, did my master's in my 5th year, and then got drafted to go. And then my goal was to go to law school. And then that got derailed by playing a decade in the NFL. So I think, at least for me, there's always been a desire to know that the biggest challenges, the biggest fish, whatever it is, happens in the deepest water. So I need to push myself in there, and that nothing good happens in the kiddie pool. So whether it be in college, playing in the NFL, going over and, whatever it looked like, I just knew that was the age old, what was it? The lollipop of mediocrity. Once one lick and you suck forever.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wasn't trying to be average. I wasn't trying to be mediocre. I didn't, I realized talking to Joe Thomas, I was never going to go to the Hall of Fame. But I also, when I show up at the Hall of Fame to see people, the guys that I know or the guys that I played against have a lot of respect for me because of the way that I played the game, that it was never played safe, that it was always played at 100 miles an hour, hair on fire, that I was going to light somebody up. And you played with a level of intensity that people admired. So I think you just have to have that passion. Years ago, when I was in college, I read a book by Jeanette Winterson called The Passion. And it was just extremely important to me at the time because it was about having passion in everything that you did. Did you ever see that? What was the movie with Jeremy Piven and Serendipity? When he talks about at the very end with, I think it's Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah, was John Cusack?
Yeah, John Cusack. It's kind of a romantic comedy. We always watch it around
That's a good
Christmas.
movie. Yeah.
But Serendipity, in the end, when Jeremy Piven's talking about writing his friend's obituary. He's like, the Greeks only asked one thing of a person: did he live with passion? And then he goes in and he writes this guy's obituary. And I just kind of took it like that. Like, at the end of this thing, we're all going to be old. We're all going to be battered and bruised and beat up. But at the end of the day, did you do something meaningful, and did you live with passion? I think is a great marker. So
Yeah, anytime you're around somebody that's passionate, it doesn't matter what they're passionate about. You feel pretty fucking good hanging out with them.
yeah. And the exact opposite. If you're around somebody who's upset, sad, depressed,
We're just
and
uptight and like
uptight.
super squared away. Like,
and
fuck off, man.
It's like they're like Dementors, you know, from
Yeah.
Harry Potter's. They just suck the life out
They
of you.
do. Get away from those people, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it boils down to self-love. And it sounds like your dad, at least, probably your mom too. They let you know that you were loved, and they showed you love by giving you some thoughtful fucking advice.
I would venture to say no.
What?
I was not raised in a kind and gentle way at all.
Well, but that doesn't mean they didn't love the shit
Yeah,
out of you. The
well,
advice your dad gave you,
Dude,
that's a very thoughtful advice.
dad
and,
gave
like,
me
he
a lot
gave
of-
fuck.
My dad gave me a lot of sage advice. And one of the saddest things for me was that when my dad passed away, we no longer got to speak anymore. You know, like, people are like, oh, I miss my parents. I miss my dad for the fact that we had such amazing conversation. He was so impactful in my life. But my mom, when we were growing up, it's just just very, not only just very present, but very driven. Like, my mom, like, people ask me about hard work and dedication and all that. I'm like, I learned it from my parents. My mom is relentless. She still is. And it's
Yeah,
just
my
like,
mom too.
her relentless nature is one of those things where it's like you either get on and get on board, or you're just going to get steamrolled. And I learned that early on, that, like, you just got to keep moving. My dad's analogy was, like, when you feel the wind, put your shoulder to the wind and just keep moving. Put your shoulder to the wind and just keep soldiering on. And that's how I've always done. Whenever adversity comes, you know what I do? I just keep moving forward. We never stop. And it's just blind consistency. That's why I call it stupidity.
It's very humble. Kirk, anything to throw in there?
He prattled so long, I forgot the question. What?
Isn't that what old men do? Don't they prattle?
The question was really around what separates a person who has the courage to just go for it and say, fuck it, I'm not going to play it safe. I'm not going to, do the safe thing, even though it's more comfortable. I'm going to roll the dice or take some risks and, put myself out there. Is there anything that you've seen that is a big differentiator?
Yeah, I mean, I'd really like to say that the only thing that matters is what you think of yourself, and that you're doing the right thing, and you love yourself and all that. And I think that's true sort of in the second passage of life. But at the beginning, you have to prove yourself to the world. And part of that is, a big part of that's proving yourself to yourself. At some point, hopefully, you become completely comfortable with who you are and what your capabilities are and what you're good at and what you're bad at and what you care about and what you don't care about, and you let that be okay. And that's when my life really came together. I mean, I think that's sort of, that whole second passage idea, to where I now no longer care what anybody thinks about me. I get up and I do what I know I need to do. And my success, and I said this on this podcast, when Mike first started this, my success every day is, like, did I have the courage to do the things I needed to do? And that doesn't necessarily mean I did anything heroic. It's just like, I did the shit I didn't want to do, like it's easy to avoid this, avoid that. It's like, I don't really want to do that. I'm not super comfortable with that. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that the next day. So when I was younger, the things I needed to do were big things, to, like, now it's like, I need to, like, have a lecture coming up. I need to prepare this lecture and send that. Like, I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it because that's sort of from a professional standpoint. But from a personal standpoint, I really think what's changed my life for the better, the courage that's mattered the most to me is my relationships. To have the courage to have every conversation that needs to be had. My philosophy with my personal relationships is Like I literally don't want an hour to go by without having said what needs to be said, you know, having my friends and the people I'm related, you know, my friends and family, the people I care about, for them to know how much I care about them and what I think about them, and that we get rid of any bad blood, because one thing you learn in our world is how fragile life is and how quickly guys go. And, you know, you lose 50 or 60 guys, you know, and 10 years, like, wow, yeah, I'm easily one of those guys, you know. They're just, there's no telling when it's going to happen. So,
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is, "The meaning of life is that it ends." And I read that, and it always stuck with me. So yeah, thanks for sharing, guys. Wisdom, self-awareness, courage, protein. It's Cinco de Mayo, so we've talked a lot about protein and muscle gain, and now we're going to go eat a bunch of carbs and some margaritas and destroy the day's gains.
I like it.
Any questions, Will, from the audience that we haven't gotten to?
We did have one from John. If you want to touch on this.
Sure, throw it on.
Lesson you learned from the NFL.
What's the biggest lesson I learned from the NFL?
Yeah.
Hard question.
Largest lesson.
Don't wear your pink jock strap under your white spandex.
Oh, I wouldn't care about that. I learned a few things. I learned early on, I coined what I believe to be a very eclectic, esoteric quote, which is, "In the absence of true leadership, false prophets appear." So what would happen early on in Philadelphia? I don't think that we had great leadership amongst the players. And when that happens, players start pontificating and people start becoming false prophets. We're going to do this. And they start making preposterous claims, more so than like, we've done the work. Go be out there and be the person you know that you are. Go do your fucking job. And you get these people that want to like pull everybody into the shower and fucking do this. And they were usually the people that didn't work hard all week, were the ones who basically became the false prophets.
Mm-hmm.
So then all of a sudden, as we got better and I became a little bit older, I would see this and I'd be like, fuck off, false prophet. Get the fuck away from me. We've done our jobs. We're professionals. Stop this nonsense. And since then, I've always been like, in the absence of true leadership, false prophets appear. So I learned that piece. The other thing I learned is that regardless of how it's pitched to you, if it's a business and somebody's making money, you have to treat it the same way. So I was very young and very idealistic and very black and white. And that got me into some trouble in my career, that I took people at face value. Hey, we need you to do this, and you know, rah, rah, rah. And they sell you part of being a team, and you go out and you do some things at your detriment that you shouldn't. And then, you know, they make promises, and then you come back and hold them to their word. And you realize that this is a business, and that if it's not in writing, and believe me, everybody's like a high five, and like, never confuse that. And I think I confused it very early on. I figured that
It's easy to do.
team and this and the whole thing meant a lot, and that my word meant something, and the word is your bond in a handshake. And I realized that it wasn't the case. And I learned that later on. So I'd say anything that involves making money and that looks like a business, if it walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If it's a business, treat it as such. And that anybody that shits on you because of it, being like, whoa, money's changing hands. I'm a commodity in this thing, and I need to treat myself in such a way that I'm protecting who I am. So I didn't learn that very early on, and my agent was a fucking idiot, and it was very emotional, and we made some bad choices, and it ended up fucking me, because I ended up moving out of Philly and getting a chance to go play for Kansas City, which was great, but I should have never left Philly. It was a great situation. So I learned that piece. The other one that I learned is that you can will yourself to do just about anything if you've prepared for the task and the challenge. So I trained at such a rate, I trained with such intensity in the off season, that I knew that nothing that was going to happen to me during the season was going to be as hard as what we did in the crucible of training.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you show up and you play in the hottest game in NFL history, which I did, which was, 163 degrees on the field, and September 1, noon in Dallas on the open, sun coming in.
Yep.
I played that game and was able to persevere where others weren't, because we had trained up into it. I never want to get to a situation where hope is what's going to get me through. I hope that this doesn't happen, or I hope I'll get through. I like to walk out there knowing that what I've done is going to give me the propulsion to get through it. So in the NFL, dude, I've said this to people for years, that your worst nightmare in terms of what you haven't prepared for, whether it is watching film or physically or whatever it looks like, if you haven't watched enough film and you don't know this, or you don't understand the scheme, or you haven't physically prepared the way, whatever your fear is will become your reality over and over again, as much as you don't want it. So if you're like nervous, you're like, man, I've watched film, this guy's got an incredible outside spin move, or he does this, Warren Sapp had this move where he'd shoot his chest and he would do this thing we call the matrix. If you haven't prepared for that, he will give that to you until you stop him.
Yeah.
And your worst fear will get played out in real time with John Madden going back and forth, or, the announcer, whoever it is, going back and forth, circling you and showing this and describing, this guy's getting killed. Like, that'll become your reality. So what you do is you prepare for that, so that your reality is hard nosed and success. And then you go out and you get a chance to be on John Madden's horse trailer because you end up kicking Warren Sapp's ass. So, I mean, like, that was what I trained for. So I just hope is never a good plan. I think I got that from the SEAL teams. It's the same deal in the NFL. And if you're not prepared, whatever you're not prepared for will become your instant reality, your nightmare, whatever you want to call it.
Everything inconsistent with your goal will reveal itself.
Yeah, it's kind of like, Doc, you've seen this. Like, when you put things off, all of a sudden those things come knocking at your front door and you can't get away from them. Same in the NFL. Whatever your fear is, whatever you haven't prepared for, will become your reality living in a time.
That's life, man.
Even if you did 99 out of 100 things, that one thing that's inconsistent with your goal, that's going to reveal itself.
We'd have guys that wouldn't do the conditioning test, and then they show up and they'd be like, hey, we're going to do the conditioning test and then some. And I'd be like, oh shit, thank God we conditioned for this. So I just, preparation was key. And I use that with any of the young fighters I work. I put them into a crucible so that nothing that they'll face on the mat or they'll face out there will be as hard as what they've done within training with me. And I get into their ass. We get fucking into it. They come off, like, let's say we're doing the conditioning off the bikes. As soon as they come off the bikes, I chase them, I tackle them from behind. I try to get them in this. I try to slam them so that they come off and they're most vulnerable, and they know. And they told me, they're like, even at my most vulnerable, I know I can fight. So that's
good shit.
We prepare people for.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Kirk. We'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for tuning in out here.
Thank you.